Hey, this is another episode of God is Laughing at Us, the podcast. I am Anthony Heath, and today I just would like to start off with a little bit of a story. So, as I shared, my name is Anthony Heath II, and for much of my life, for a lot of people that whether it's grew up with me, raised me, or have just known me my entire life, more or less, I've always been known as Tony. So much so that I don't think my mom has ever called me Anthony. And it's always been an interesting thing for me because like I almost had this situation where I kind of segmented Anthony, Tony, and whatever nickname I picked up along the way into like these separate personalities. Like they were all me, but they were circumstantial in different parts of me. Like Tony was just kind of agreeable, go with the flow. Like that's the acceptable version and presentation. But then there's Anthony. Anthony is Anthony Sr.'s firstborn. And I didn't connect with that for a while. I didn't connect with being my father's son. I didn't connect with um just what that meant, the weight of that name. So in turn, Anthony was kinda reserved for, like, school. I was Anthony at school, don't call me anything like that because I don't know you like that. I was Anthony in professional settings as I got into my career. I was just like, "Imma be Anthony here," because, again, I wanna keep you people at arm's length. But there was kinda like this divide in me that, Anthony was like "I'm about my business. Imma do my thing." Tony was just, like I said, just more easygoing, lax, probably could be referred to as even passive as much as I don't like to use that word. So it was just really just this big difference in terms of perception of how I move, how I operated, and things that I just really had to kind of get over to really just have like this kind of flip. So years pass, time goes on, and as life happened, and I found myself really getting involved in my church community, choosing a church, not just sitting on the sidelines because I had a million reasons not to go to church until, of course, the pandemic came around. And then I was in the same boat of everybody else. It's like, oh, I can't go to work. I can't go to church every Sunday. And everybody's like, well, neither can we. So God is just like, excuse shed, go. And with that, I really did my best to show up. Well, did my best in my mind to show up as Tony. I wanted to play the back. I wanted to stay in the background. I didn't want to be seen or heard. I didn't want to be noticed. I just wanted to come church, get my Jesus, and go home. And the funny thing is, like, as I started to get to know people at the church, a lot of people were just like, what's your name? And I defaulted to Anthony. Anthony's my name. So that's what I defaulted to introducing myself as. But I'm like, but when it was somebody that I saw myself as being potential friends with, I'm like, but everybody calls me Tony. Then people at my church, they're just like, nah, I don't see it. You're Anthony. And I'm just like, my dad is Anthony. There's so many other Anthonys that we don't need another one. And it was really just a realization that was holding on to Tony so hard because Tony was comfortable. Tony was familiar. Tony didn't require me to ever stretch myself or pursue anything outside of what I was doing in the workplace. So there was just no room left for that. I'm like, I don't want to have to be Anthony all the time. But as I got mature or more mature in my relationship with God, as I just started to pursue things in a different light, in a different manner, what started to happen, it was like, God, you ain't gonna let me be as comfortable as I want to be. And that until I start pursuing the discomfort, I'm not going to grow. So as much as I wanted to play the background, I couldn't. And then as much as I wanted to continue to have like this Tony thing going, what I realized is that when my first marriage ended, there was this representative that I had created. That representative turned out to be Tony. And that representative died as I healed, as I went into therapy, as I got counseling from the assistant pastor. It's just like that representative, that second face, that mask that I had to wear to kind of cope through life, that had to die. And when the mask was destroyed, when Tony, the representative of Anthony Heath, went away, I started to realize that, Tony had to be buried so Anthony can surrender. Tony had to be buried, and because Tony never walked in confidence. Tony never walked with purpose. Tony never operated in a way that God has always called Anthony to. I just gotten so comfortable ignoring Anthony or putting Anthony in a box that I failed to realize that that's who God needed me to be. So I appreciate y'all sitting through my story because you probably wondering like, okay, so where am I going with this, right? So, but this is what we really want to get to today. When God has given you a name, or when God just puts a name on something and you continue to refer to, or when you continue to be referred to by something else, like when you're called by something that God hasn't stamped you as, it's just like, what is happening? So people keep calling you what they see you as. And the whole time, God is just laughing because you are showing up to purpose. You are showing up to destiny. You are showing up to his will, and you're answering to a name fitting of a completely different season. So just to kind of get more into it. So how many of us have run into somebody that we used to know back in the day and they'll call you by something that you thought was left at the crib? That that you got that family nickname, or you got that street name or something that you left behind a long time ago. So now you sitting here, like, bro, I pay bills, and you still calling me man, or you still calling me Lil XYZ? Like what's going on here? Like I'm not there no more. Like you're calling me something that's reflective of a different time in my life, that's reflective of a different mindset. So I don't rock with that anymore. But because you're so familiar with it, you just kind of let it ride. But we can laugh about this. Like we can laugh about the man-mans and the nuck-nucks and the peanuts and the big heads. We can laugh about all these things, but how about when we really get into the spiritual side of it, and it's like God says we're a leader, but we see ourselves as just left out. Or God says you're set apart, and you see yourself as, why don't I fit in? God says you're healed, but you still see broken. God says you're whole, but you still see yourself as too much and simultaneously insufficient. So it's like you're sitting here with this identity crisis. And God is like, I never called you left out. I never called you hard to love. I never called you too much. I never called you difficult. I've called you leader. I've called you whole. I called you love. I've called you all of these things. So why are we sitting here on one side of it when God is now calling us this? So we can sit here and just be in this full blown identity crisis, wondering, what's really good. And just to really speak to the importance of names, one of the things that just really comes to me is Exodus chapter 3, 13 through 14. So contextually, after Moses had spent his time in Midian, God came to him in a burning bush to, to really get his attention. And in getting his attention, he's just starting to have this conversation with him, telling him, okay, I want you to go back to Egypt. I want you to get my people. I want you to tell Pharaoh we about to bounce and we about to get up out of here. So you could do this or you can't. But either you do it willingly it's going or you don't, but it's going to happen regardless. So as you're getting into that conversation, we just get to Moses saying to God, if I go to the Israelites and say, the God of your father sent me, and they ask, what's his name? What do I tell them? And God just said, I am who I am. I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. So God and Moses had this moment where it's interesting because, for one, it's always dope to me when I really think about the culture back then and just context things in regards to the culture. Like, Egypt had buku gods. They had their sun god, they had their river god, they had their fertility god, they had their, they had their god proxy in Pharaoh. They had all of these different things that were representative of God, a lowercase g, as I like to call it. So they had all these lowercase g's running around with all these different names. So the Israelites who had been in Egypt for a couple hundred years, at this point, you know, they remembered the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They remember this. They know of him. They have had the stories passed down and shared amongst their people. But even as they had these stories, they've also been in a culture that had a bunch of lowercase g's that ran or represented everything. So when God says that I am who I am, that for one lets them know that I am who I am, meaning that I'm not one of these other gods that you've been having up in your face all of this time. But also, I don't need permission to be God. I don't need, like, I'm not in a box. I am not restricted. I am not the I am self-defined. And with that, when approach this, like, of course God has many names and that fits to his character. Like, there's El Shaddai, there's Elohim, there's Jehovah Jireh, Rapha. There's a lot of names that refer to his very character. But when it comes down to it, it all comes back to I am who I am. Whether you use the name Yahweh, whether you use Jehovah, it all comes back to I am. Just different translations of I am. So God was so serious about his name that he also spoke a name to Moses that kind of invoked that we use each and every day. So how many times do we say I am? Really think about it. How many times each and every day are you saying I am? And what follows that I am? Are you speaking a blessing or a curse behind that I am? So just knowing that God says I am, that's the essence of who he is. I am. I am self-sufficient and I am enough for whatever your need is, whatever you have need for, I am. So God says that. So how do you navigate and how do you really let him take over and take control of what you really have going on. Because if you can't accept the I am loved, I am powerful, I am joy, I am lovable. If you can't enjoy and if you can't appreciate those things, you're going to find yourself really sticking to names that don't fit. You're going to say, I am an overthinker. I am petty. I am I am a hot mess. I am a problem child. Like I am a can't get right. And we got to look at all of these different things. Like, what part of these things are defense mechanisms, right? Which part of these things are survival strategies? Because going back to my story about really embracing my identity as Anthony, so much so that I look at people crazy when they call me Tony now. And for anybody listening that still calls me Tony, I'm like, I'll respond, but you just know that that's not who I identify as anymore. I don't see myself as Tony. I see Anthony. Like Anthony is now the name that my internal voice refers to, or what my internal voice refers to. When I hear God speaking to me, whenever I hear the audible voice of God, he's not saying Tony, he's saying Anthony. And just in the same way that I have never heard my mom call me Tony, I don't think I've ever heard God call I'm sorry, I said, let me get that right. Just in the same way that I have never heard my mom call me Anthony, when I really start to think about it, I have never heard my father in heaven call me Tony. When God has spoken to me, when God has had something to say, when God needed to get my attention, it was Anthony. It's always been Anthony, and I doubt that's going to change. But with that said, it's like the survival mechanisms, the survival strategies, the way that we just try to survive, i- it really came with these things in some cases that it's like, look, I wanted to like I was worried about being too much or doing too much, so I played small. I created a personality and gave a name to a or attached the name to a personality that allowed me to play small. In some cases, sometimes some of these nicknames that come or these names that we get stuck with or these things that we fold into our personality, it could very well be because it's just a joke that just stuck, that just became attached to you. Like when you was little, you had a big head. Like you were Bevo Lottie, got more head than he got body, and you eventually grew into your head. But nobody let that go. You remain big head, or or you could be in a situation where you started wearing glasses early and then you just became four eyes. And no matter how many contacts you go through, no matter how many LASIK surgeries, prayerfully only one LASIK surgery for those who have gone through that. But like if you've gone through any of those things, you don't shed that. So sometimes you just don't shed certain things because people have this kind of understanding of like they don't grow, or they like you don't grow in their eyes at their rate. So they continue to attach these names to you that don't seem to fit. Like they attach things to you that don't belong in your purpose, that are not connected to your purpose, that when it's time for when it's go season, when it's all up season, you have to leave those things behind because it no longer belongs there. So you really can't sit here and say certain things that I do this in the name of Jesus when you're still struggling with your identity in Jesus. Like, like in order to really utilize the full power of Jesus, you have to really be connected to who Jesus says you are. Like when you get to what is it, Acts 19, I believe it's like Acts 19:13, around where there's the seven sons of Sceva. That's what it's like. Trying to cast out a demon that you answer into, like still broken, like never healed, can't get right. Like trying to cast out a demon is almost in Jesus's name while you're still responding to something that's not your own name is almost the equivalent of sitting there and being like what they did. Like I cast you out in the name of Jesus, which Paul speaks of. Like so if I'm responding, if my identity is rooted in the wrong thing and it's not rooted in the true love and connection with Jesus, I can't cast out a demon. I can't lay hands on someone. I can't effectively pray and have faith in God for someone else when I'm still struggling with the faith that I should have over my own life. Because when you really think about it, like think about the people in the Bible, think about the figures that we've seen in the Bible. There's been a handful of name changes, and sometimes it maybe wasn't a true name change, but it was an identity shift. Like it was something that was required so that you can kind of have this understanding. So when you go to Genesis chapter 17, for instance, that's where you see God tell Abram that he'll no longer be referred to as Abram, but from henceforth he's Abraham. So and it's cool when you really get into some of just like the definitions of these names. So Abram was meant exalted father, which is so he was already named by a God to say you are going to be a father. But when it was time for him to walk into purpose, when it's time for him to step into what God said, like no, you will not just be you will not just be considered as a father in high regard, but you will be a father of many nations. So you are now like getting the upgrade that your purpose, that the promise that I have given you, it requires an upgrade. So trust and believe and receive that upgrade. Like God even renamed him before the promise came to pass. So he gave. So it's almost like he received that name prophetically. That he received that name prophetically, so that he can begin to walk in what God was saying. Okay, you are no longer Abram, you are now Abraham, and it is time to do the thing that I promised you that you were going to do. And his wife went from Sarai to Sarah. So he went, so Sarai, she was just my princess. So she was precious personally. Like she was the princess of one, my princess. But then Sarah, princess of many. So it's expanded. So she's not just so obviously God is the king. She's the daughter of God. So she has that princess, but now she is of many. So it went from just like this closed box to this bigger thing, right? So just being able to understand that shift, that and again, before the promise came, that the name was not contingent upon the work being done, but it was a part of understanding what God is doing and just being able to walk into and embrace what was being done there. And then you have Jacob becoming Israel, and Jacob wrestling with the angel of the Lord. You'll find the story in Genesis 32. But when you really get into Jacob, when you get into just his character, that Jacob was a little conniving, a schemer, he was a deceiver, and also and he was also referred to as a heel grabber, or a supplanter. So all of those things he did as Jacob, but when it came time for him to really walk into purpose, He went from Jacob, the deceiver, the schemer, to Israel, like he who wrestles with God. And also another translation could be God prevails. So it was really just referring to the victory that God had already set up for his people. And again, he changed his name before there was a nation of Israel. Before there were even 12 tribes. Did he have 12 sons? Yes. But there had not been the establishment of those tribes. There had not been, the exile, the time in Egypt had not even occurred where they were expanding and growing to that extent. But God was like, no, next up, I'm not going, like, you're not going to build this nation, or you're not going to become the foundation of this nation based on how you hustled and how you swindled and how you played a game. But it's going to be defined by what and how we connected apart from everything else. And it's funny because I came across this really powerful thing that I just thought about. So shout out to the Bible department, Dr. Manny Arango. I really enjoy the content that he puts out but with this Bible plan, but he just really touched on something, that knowing that Jacob wrestled with Esau in the womb. And it's almost like God did not just simply rename him, but he set things right. Like he gave him the name that he very well could have had from birth. But then we get into one of the 12 when you get Matthew chapter 16. So there, Jesus asked, "Who do men say I am?" And some say John the Baptist, and some say Elijah, some say one of the other prophets. Jesus is like, "But who do you say I am?" I'm sure each and every one of the disciples probably had an opportunity to speak up, but OG Peter was like, "You the Christ, you the Son of God, you the Messiah. Yeah, like you all that, homie." Let me not get too familiar, but but Simon, called Peter, he understood the assignment. He was like, "Look, if y'all not gonna say something, I'm gonna say what I believe, and I'm gonna stand on it." And and it's funny because, like, Simon, translate one of the translations for Simon could be "he has heard." So he heard, and not just like being in proximity to God, but it's like he heard the word, he received and he accepted the revelation. But because of that revelation, because he was the one to speak up, he became Peter, the rock, the rock upon which Jesus would build his church. That because Simon was able to recognize that Jesus is the Son of God, the Messiah, Jesus was able to like just reveal more to him and to the 12 as a result. But what's always funny to me is because shortly after that, Peter had a Simon moment real quick. Like Peter reverted to Simon just as quickly as Jesus blessed him with a new name. It he almost almost got away. Like Jesus is like, okay, and the Son of Man will suffer these things. We're going down to Jerusalem, and some things are about to happen. And and Peter is like, not with me around. They gonna have to go through me. Ain't nobody going through you. Like they want to kill you, then watch what happen. And Jesus just looked back like, get thee behind me, Satan. You don't know what spirit you're of right now. Like, could you imagine having one of these faith-filled moments, having one of these big revelations, and then getting so quickly reminded that, okay, I still need to be humbled. It's it's just funny because it's that cycle that we experience, and it's that real life thing that we deal with on a regular basis, that we just kind of find ourselves in this space of like, Man, Lord, you just blessed me. And in the same breath that that you blessed me, you reminded me of that thing that I'm still dealing with. That I have the revelation and the clear understanding over here, but I'm still fighting and need some pruning over there. But that be encouraged because both things can happen at once. That you can be refined in one area, but still need some pruning in another. So if you don't see at least a little bit of yourself in Peter, you might be in denial a little bit, but it's okay because you still got room to grow, as we all do. And even though I can continue to go on and on, I will also just present Saul the Benjaminite, but not King Saul of Israel, but Paul, who would become like Saul, the persecutor, who would become Paul, the apostle. And one of the beautiful things is that it really wasn't a intentional or necessarily a full-blown name change. It was simply that Saul is my Hebrew name, Paul is my Roman name. And Paul, well, Paul had his experience with Jesus in Acts 9 on the road to Damascus. And in that process, like how his perception, his understanding, his movement and everything, it was altered. And it's just interesting because the name Saul means desired one. But Paul can be translated as small or humble. And it's amazing because it's like the main reason that I've kind of picked up on for Saul transitioning and being largely referred to as Paul is in the scripture. He said, I, I will be all things to all people. Like I am all things to all people, and not like in a people pleasing way, but I am who you need me to be in order for you to connect with God through me. Not that I'm doing this for your sake so that you can just like me. It's like, no, it's like so you can see God through me. And if you receive me a little bit more on the front end, and you hear a name that sound like yours as opposed to this Hebrew name that y'all probably already think that the Hebrew people a little bit crazy over there, then so be it. I'll adjust. And that's really when you get into it, that's what purpose looks like. Because the difference between Tony and Anthony is very minimal. Like same name, effectively. Like drop a couple letters. Like same base, same root, same origin, all of that. And but the big difference is one just not for me. It's just one just resonates a little bit more now. Like one once did, but Tony just didn't. Like I didn't feel important. And I didn't feel, and I didn't want to be important. Not only did I not feel important, but I didn't want to be important. I clung on to the name that allowed me to not to walk in this sense of false humility, because that's what it was. It wasn't real humility. It wasn't the type of humility that reverences God. It was the type of humility that really just lied on I think less of myself than everybody else, plain and simple. So let's talk about, so what is God calling us now then? Like we've talked about the name changes. We've seen some of the most important figures, the most powerful people to ever exist. And in their stories, what are we being called now? What are we being referred to as now? Like God may be calling us whole. He's calling us free. He's calling us overcomers. He's saying that we are more than conquerors. He's calling us leaders. He says that we are heir, we are a friend of God, we are sons and daughters of the Most High, that we are all of these things, that we are all of these things. We have all of these new identities. We have all of these things that mean that through humility, God is exalting us because he has us set up to do his kingdom work. But if we're really about his kingdom work, we got to accept what he's saying we are. We need to really dig into the word and we need to go back and say, what does the word say I am? Who does the word say I am? If the word says that I am above and not beneath, I am the head and not the tail, then I need to believe that as opposed to what the enemy wants to distract me into believing. Like like if I've outgrown something, if I've outgrown trauma, I need to not hold on to the tag of the trauma. I need to remove the trauma tag. I need to remove the name tag that says traumatized. I need to remove the name tag that says broken. I need to remove the name tag that says insufficient. The name tag that says not good enough. The name tag that says I'm too much, or the name tag that says I'm not enough. Whatever those tags are, you need to replace that with the tag that can be and wear it boldly on your chest plate of righteousness. Like, put on that breastplate of righteousness and put and write on it. Just tag that name on it and say, I am loved. I am whole. I am healed. I am whatever and everything that the word of God has said I am. That's who I am. That's the identity that I'm a ride with today. And because when it comes down to it, just as we just get ready to close this thing out, God isn't calling you by your past. Whatever situation God found you in, or whatever situation that you looked up and you accepted the call of Jesus, he didn't call you by your situation. He didn't call you by your circumstance. He didn't call you by your trauma. He didn't call you by your hurt. He didn't call you by your pain. He called you by your assignment. He called you by your purpose. He called you to restoration. He called you to something greater than whatever you were sitting in when you heard his voice. So if he calls you the head and not the tail, if he says that you have authority to crush serpents, I'm sorry, to crush scorpions and step on snakes, if he says that you are able to be bit by the venomous snake and not be sick, to not be harmed, if he's saying these things, if he says that if he says that you are made in my image, why or what makes you think that it's okay for you to answer to not enough? What makes you think that it's okay for you to answer to I'm not that great? What makes you think that it's okay to answer to I'm never going to get it right? God is calling you some amazing things. So really just accept that, breathe that, take that. Because at the end of the day, God is laughing. And it's not because you lost, but it's because you're trying to answer his call. You're trying to answer his call with a name that no longer exists. So this is been God is Laughing at You, the podcast. Again, this is Anthony Heath signing off. I love y'all. I pray that this continues to touch and hit home for you. So until next time, peace.